right now in that the caseworker needs to look at any barriers to employment. And of course, the issue of whether or not drugs are being used or not would be considered one. And so that initial screening is kind of really taking place anyway. The question is whether or not you go do further assessment and even possibly a drug test. And if so, we wanted to make sure that folks just didn't have benefits taken away from them. We wanted to get them into a corrective program as long as they're complying with that. Then there's no interruption, only if non-compliance. Is there any interruption of benefits? And even then, it's only the benefits that are attributable to the individual using the drugs and not the family.
And Mr. Chairman, the committee with myself, Senator Carrico, and Senator Herring, this would be referred to finance if we reported favorably, and so I would move that.
Mr. Chairman, before the motion,
Senator Miller.
I'd like to ask a question. Are there any people in the Commonwealth receiving money from the Commonwealth or flow through from the federal government who are tested for drugs other than poor people?
Senator Hart.
Well, I can tell you that if he's subject to it, you're employed anywhere, and no matter what your level of employment are, if it is, if you or the company is receiving money in any way, you could be subject to it. This is not an intention to get at a class of people at all, because my personal opinion is that you'll find that there's no greater drug use among this class or another class. But it is a question of whether or not, and the Senator is raising that question right now, whether or not money that's intended to go towards supporting the basic needs of a household is really going there, or is it going to support a drug addiction?
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Miller.
with all respect to the patron, he is not answering my question. It was not money going to poor people. I asked you if we are giving money. Are we testing any other people in this state who are receiving either flow through federal money or receiving money from the state of Virginia who are tested for drugs other than poor people?
And that was the first answer, Mr. Chairman, that I said. And no matter what your area of employment is, you may be receiving, whatever way you may be receiving money, you are subject to drug testing under your employment. So, but no, we as a state are not saying in order for you to get this tax reduction or credit or whatever, you are going to be drug tested. And the reason why is because the basis for your receiving it is that you're doing something in order as a result of that to receive the money.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Black.
if I could just add one point, I know that every single member of the Department of Defense, of whom we've got many, many thousands in this state, are subject to drug testing. If they fail the drug test, very often they are eliminated from the service. They lose their entire pay, their entire benefits, their retirement benefits, every single thing. I know that as a full colonel, I was required to be drug tested at random without notice, and had I come up positive, I'd have out the door. So these are the folks. These are folks who are tested very routinely, and this is not a novel idea.
Mr. Chairman. Senator Garrett.
And to address the state issue, as a state police officer, I was randomly drug tested without notice, without screening. I was just told at a random point in time that you go, you submit to a test, and that's state tax dollars that pay that salary.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Hawk.
a question for the patron. Do the heads of corporations that receive tax credits from the Commonwealth have to have drug tests?
As I said just a minute ago, no matter what your level of employment within a given company, you're probably subject to it within that company. I would say that the money that you're talking about receiving from the state in that instance is because of a particular thing that the individual or the company is that we're trying to incentivize them to do. And so as a result of their action, that we're trying to encourage them to do, just the reason why they're getting that money. So, but they would not be subject to it from us, but they could well be subject to it within their own organization. They probably are. As a matter of fact, it's not unusual for people to say, you know, I'm looking for a job, pray for me, you know, to help. And then they come along and say, well, hey, I got a job, I've got to go in for a drug test on this such and such a day. That's the normal thing, but not subjected by the state for the very reason I've already said several times now. In those instances, it's because whoever's receiving the money is doing something that we're trying to encourage them to do and incentivize them to do.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Ross.
Then why are we singling out a group of people who are receiving either flow-through federal money or state funding for this specific type of testing? If we're also giving money to corporations as a tax credit, why can we not legislate that they also do drug tests?
Because as I've already said, Mr. Chairman, in responding to that, and responding to a fourth time, in those other cases, we're trying to incentivize them towards their action. That's the reason they're receiving whatever they're receiving from the government. But in the particular case you're talking about here, our reason for doing this is because this is money that is going towards, supposed to be going to support the family and children in need, and we simply are wanting to make sure it goes towards that we have a motivation to try to assure.
Mr. Chairman,
We're motivated to assure that.
Senator Garrett.
is it not true that when we do tax credits to corporations, those monies are earmarked for designated to do certain things in order for them to comply? In the incident of TANF dollars, there's no requirement this cash money goes to the individual without any reasons of what they use the money for.
But it's true that either through incentivization or compliance issues, there's this direct links to what we want the people that are receiving the money to do. In this instance, we're giving the money because we want it to provide for the children in that home, basically. And our interest here is to make sure that that's happening. And I'll say again, I do not anticipate that the rate of drug abuse in this among this population is any different than the other. I anticipate it will be very similar, but we have a responsibility to make sure the money is going where it's supposed to go.
Senator Fuller.
Thank you. I noticed that we've all got a recognized back editorial on our desk, and on our places. It says that Florida has already tried this. It found the vast majority of those on public assistance, 98% are clean. Then a federal judge blocked further testing as a possible violation of the constitutional ban on reasonable services. Where is the probable cause? So that may happen to us if we pass this bill. Would it not be possible?
Senator Mark.
I'm going to yield to Senator Carrico, who has had a similar bill that's rolled in.
Senator Carrico.
Mr. Chairman, the article that you have before you is referring to a federal legislation that was passed, which is not exactly the same as the legislation that we have. There's several things under the federal or the Florida legislation that don't apply here. We're using a screening method to determine probable cause, and also we're not subjecting the individual to criminal prosecution if they test positive. And the one thing that the article doesn't clearly reflect, it's in my opinion, a skewed, biased opinion of a media interpretation of the Florida law, because there is no indication to how many people, even though only 2% tested positive, there's no clear indication of how many people that could have applied failed to apply because of this law being in place.
Is there further discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I have one more
Senator Lawson.
question. Senator Martin, can you give me the number of individuals who are illegally using drugs or substance abuse who are on this program?
No, we've been doing no assessment that would allow me to know.
Do we know if there's widespread, thank you, Mr. Chairman, if there's widespread substance abuse of individuals who are on this program?
I think this will be the fourth time I've said this. My expectation is it's no different than the balance of the population. I'm not anticipating it being any higher.
No further discussion, Mr. Chairman? So,
I was the one no voted in the subcommittee.
You want it stronger, as I understand.
go ahead, Senator Aaron.
Well, I had a lot of concerns with it, and hearing the discussion, I think it would be helpful to bring out a couple of points. One of them is, as Senator Carrico said, well, there's a screening. I think there was some discussion about, well, we're not, one difference between the Florida cases, we're not just testing everybody without any probable cause. We're doing the screening, but there was no information presented in the subcommittee that the screening methods were really an accurate predictor of actual substance use, illegal substance use. And I can't remember whether it was something like 5% of those screened actually turned out to be using illegal drugs. I'm not sure if that number was thrown out there or not. So the screening mechanism to determine, quote, probable cause, nobody should feel like that's a real strong, there's a real correlation. I mean, there's probably some correlation, but there was no evidence to show that it was a strong correlation, that they were really that accurate of a predictor. Not only that, this really is not, in my view, intended to get at the substance abuse problem. If so, if that were really the purpose for this, the $2.7 million in the next biennium that this would cost really would be better spent toward substance abuse treatment and prevention programs, for which there is a waiting list a mile long in a lot of localities because there's a lack of funding. And so if we really wanted to get at substance abuse problems, the money would be much better spent redirecting it toward those prevention problems. And instead, we're singling out a group of people that feeds a misimpression about them. We don't require this for tag grant recipients. The other discussion has been about corporate CEOs and people who get tax credits. We don't do it for tag grant recipients either. So it really appears to be targeted at the participants in this particular program, rather than something that is really designed to address substance abuse problems, which really the money should be redirected toward those prevention and treatment programs, if that's really what it was about.
Senator Martin.
Your first point, if you'll remind me, your first point had to do with whether or not to make the first point again.
The notion that the screening is really probable cause, okay, that means they really probably are using illegal substances. It was not demonstrated at all.
Mr. Chairman, the fact is, as I said the very first thing when I stepped to this microphone, we're already doing that initial assessment because, and we're determining whether or not there's a barrier through this, Mr. Chairman. We're trying to determine whether that's a barrier to employment. And we're already using that standard, and drugs are one of the potential barriers for employment, drug use, and so they're already trying to work with folks on that. We already have the authority to require that they work with folks in trying to deal with that from an employment barrier perspective. So to the degree that it's always wholly accurate, it may not be, and then when you go on that next step, you may find out that you're not wholly accurate. So what you did in your first assessment may not have been accurate, so you back off and say, well, okay, done. So that part of it's already being done. So, I mean, I don't understand the concern from in that regard.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Carrico, and I think Senator Herring had said something about making it apply to tag grants. If that, he wants that amendment, I'm, as one of the papers, I'll agree to that.
It's your own bill. No, I'm teasing.
I mean, I had no problem. Yeah.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator from Ball.
Thank you. Senator, would you agree that this population suffers more from perhaps a lack of education, lack of access to transportation, lack of job skills, other problems that are far more obvious and prevalent and barriers to this population succeeding or becoming more mainstream? Would you agree?
Yes, and the review, which being a patron of our early efforts in this regard, the empowerment stuff that we're doing in the welfare reform, that was our motivation to try to help folks on these multiple levels. Yes, there are multiple barriers that the department's trying to work with because we've given them the authority to do so. And sometimes one feeds on the other. And just one of the issues could be broken.
Well, I think there's
Senator Ball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think there's a presumption here that simply because they're poor or have these challenges, they may be more inclined to participate in drug use. I don't think that's a fair or appropriate assumption for a government entity to be making, especially when part of our role is to protect people's rights, their rights to privacy. I think other problems that you and I just talked about are much more deserving of money and resources.
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree. I don't know how many people are in here right now, but there may be more drug use going on in here than for the average population. That's not what's intended. What's intended here is to make sure that money that we're spending to take care of the basic needs of a family that needs it for whatever their reason. And the reason, bottom line, is they don't have financial resources. Otherwise, we want to make sure that money's actually going to take care of it.
Senator Herring.
Mr. Chairman, we did discover there is a philosophical divide on this particular issue. All three of the bills in the subcommittee were aired, and that's why we don't have a large crowd here this morning for any of these bills, because they're given an opportunity to speak pro and con on a series of three bills. The mention of the amendment, I think, is perhaps well taken, except it wouldn't fit in with this particular bill. I suggested in subcommittee that we test all college students going to public colleges and universities because they're using taxpayer dollars, and this ought to be a good thing to do. However, on the strength of the vote in the subcommittee, I move that this bill, Senate Bill 6, amendment nature of substitute, be reported and re-referred to the Senate Finance Committee.
We have a motion properly seconded that Senate Bill 6 be an amendment in nature of substitute, be reported and be referred to finance. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed?
No.
Clerk call the roll.
Senator Miller,
No.
Senator Fuller,
No.
Senator Hanger,
Aye.
Senator Locke,
No.
Senator McDougal,
Aye by proxy.
Senator Herring,
No.
Senator Barker,
No.
Senator Northam,
No by proxy.
Senator Black,
Aye.
Senator Carrico,
Aye.
Senator Reed, Senator Favola,
No.
Senator Norman,
Aye by proxy.
Senator Stosh,
Aye by proxy.
There you are. Your return, Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Wagner,
Aye.
8 yeas, 7 nays.